Let's get a little bit into the LLCs.
Yeah, so I'm gonna what I want to do right out of the bat on LLCs is sort of dispel sort of a misconception. So I get phone calls from people who have the idea that whether you have an LLC that's in Florida or in Delaware or in Nevada or in Wyoming, that there are specific protections for you because of the place where it's established and it's formed, organized. That is true to some extent. However, your rights as an owner of an LLC are going to be dictated according to the state in which you live. So a limited liability company, an interest in a limited liability company is considered personal property. And personal property is the rights in personal property going to be established under the state law in which you live, right? So you want to have an operating agreement. You want to be in a state that says charging order is specifically permitted, right? But you need to live in a state also that says, well, if we're gonna, if there's a judgment against you personally, and we're gonna look at what assets you have. Oh, you have a limited liability company. Well, we live in Florida. It's a multi-member LLC, so you get charging order protection, right? Charging order protection means that the creditor can't go into the LLC and take assets out of it. They're limited to basically saying we're going to garnish whatever is distributed from the LLC. But in Florida, if you have a single member LLC, because of the Olmstead case, a creditor can essentially foreclose on the interest and take the assets out of the LLC, right? So if you have a single member Delaware LLC and you live in Florida, a Florida court could very easily say, we want to foreclose on the interest there. And that brings me to one of the biggest sort of concepts as an asset protection attorney that I deal with clients. And that is, you are at the mercy of whoever the judge and jury are that day. In the United States, if there is a judgment against you in one state, the full faith and credit clause of the United States Constitution says that's enforceable in every other state. This is one of the biggest sort of issues for what's called domestic asset protection trusts. The idea of a domestic asset, well, let me just back up a little bit further. Traditionally, the public policy is that there's no asset protection for a trust that you create for your own benefit, right? It just doesn't exist. So you can get great asset protection. One form of domestic trust is a trust that you would create for your kids or for your other descendants or heirs, and you can get great asset protection for the assets you put in there. You can get the estate tax exemption, the unified credit against whatever you're allowed to gift during your life or at death, but you're not a beneficiary of that trust.
The domestic asset protection trust you're talking about is very different than a Florida land trust for real estate, which a lot of the people that provides zero asset protection. So these are two very different things. I just want to clarify for those people that think this is the same.
Yeah. So a land trust, primary reason for using a land trust, right, is to have some semblance of privacy, right? So it's actually the trustee of the land trust would be listed on the public records. And so a company can serve as the trustee of the land trust, or you can have an individual, you can have your lawyer serve as the trustee of your land trust. And then you can transfer interests in the property itself by transferring beneficial interest in the land trust. But the land trust provides no asset protection. Okay. You can get some asset protection by having a properly formed LLC as the beneficiary of it, or another type of irrevocable trust.
Sure.
But a land trust is very specific. It's a creature of statute in Florida. So you can go read the statute and see what the requirements are and see what it takes to create a land trust. Then you have typical estate planning type of trusts, right? So it's a completely different category. You can have a life insurance trust that's intended to own a life insurance policy on your life, right? And so if you pass away, the life insurance proceeds go to the beneficiaries of it, tax-free, right? But the amount of the benefit might be included in your estate if you were to own it directly. But if you own it in a trust, then it's not included as part of your estate. If you're a single individual and you've got a $20 million life insurance policy, well, the first 11.7 is exempt from federal estate taxes, but the rest of it, the other $8.3 million would be subject to 40% estate tax. If it's owned in an irrevocable life insurance trust, it's outside of your estate. And then there's a zillion different other kinds of estate plan types of trusts, right? You've got GRATS. So you can have a trust that you create for a 2-year period of time, and you say, I'm going to contribute an asset to it, and I feel like this asset is going to appreciate very quickly. right, in value. What I'm going to do is I'm going to contribute this asset. Say you have $100,000 worth of Cardano array, right? It's a cryptocurrency. You put $100,000 in there. You say, I'm going to leave it in there for 2 years. But what I'm going to take back is an annuity. And the annuity has to be at what's called the applicable federal rate, which is a very low interest rate. So basically what you're doing is saying, I'm taking back an equal amount of payments out of the trust that equal the value that I'm putting in. But if that Cardano explodes in value, say it has a 500% appreciation over those 2 years, that 500% appreciation happens outside of your estate.
That's awesome.
Right? So it doesn't go towards your $11.7 million estate tax. You can create an irrevocable trust for your kids while you're alive, just to say, I want this to be protected for them from their future spouses or their future ex-spouses, or if they are involved in a car accident or ever have a creditor claim, or they get over their heads on a mortgage and there's a foreclosure, I want these assets to be protected, right? We can create full remainder trusts where, you create a trust, you get an income tax benefit, you get to live off of the income generated by the trust, but at the end of it, there's a charity that is going to get it, and that's the sort of the cost of the income tax benefits that you get from that.
That's
you have the estate
charitable lead trust. I heard Bryce just talk about a charitable lead trust and a charitable remainder trust. Are they different?
They're different. One is on the front end, one is on the back end.
Okay.
And then you've got there's just the variety of domestic trust that you can use to get asset protection. Or it's pretty diverse, right? You can create a trust for the benefit of your spouse where they get a certain amount of money every year, and that can be protected for you too, but there are constraints on it, right? There's constraints on how you can pull the money out to use it for certain purposes.
Again, you're going to give up some of what he said, like some of the control as soon as you, right? So you got to be comfortable with that. And this is, for example, something like that works great. Like if you got a mom or you got someone, a family member who's just, there's certain souls on this planet who are just not good with money, A, and B, not ever going to get good with money. So what you want to create for them is some kind of annuity where they get this amount and this amount only. And I'm sure you see that happen, Wayne, where they're just like, this is just what it is. Some kids, unfortunately, as much as you train them, they're just bad with money.
Yeah, it runs the whole spectrum for sure. So you can get the moral of this story is you can get asset protection and some tax benefits using domestic trusts, but you can't do that by making yourself a beneficiary of the trust, right? There's got to be some component of gifting to it, right? Relinquishing that control and that beneficial use and that beneficial ownership. In the 1980s, the Cook Islands passed a statute that essentially said, we're going to provide asset protection for a self-settled trust. So you can create a trust for your own benefit, and we're going to provide asset protection for it. Sort of the interesting nuance there is that if you create a trust in the Cook Islands, or in any of these other jurisdictions that have a self-settled trust statute, and the assets are actually custodied somewhere offshore, and you're sued in the United States, well, the full faith and credit clause that we talked about before of the United States Constitution doesn't apply, right? The judge can't order the trustee in the Cook Islands. Well, the judge can order the trustee in the Cook Islands to pay over money from the trust to your creditor, but that request is not going to be honored.
Sure.
Right. The trustee is going to throw it in the trash can. So that is the benefit to going offshore. And that scares people sometimes because it's like, wow, well, this is an international statute and we have a public policy against it in the United States. Well, wow, I think I've lost track, but I think 17, maybe 19 states have actually enacted statutes now that allow for a self-settled trust. The problem is we still have the full faith and credit clause of the United States Constitution. So if you live in Florida or California or New York or Texas or any of these other states that do not have a self-settled trust statute, and you're relying on your Nevada, Delaware, Wyoming, South Dakota, Alaska, Utah self-settled trust, they say, no, we don't recognize that. As a matter of public policy, we're busting the trust. And now the other state has to recognize the judgment because of the full faith and credit clause of the United States Constitution. So that's why now listen, if you live in Utah, right, and all of your assets are in Utah, and you're going to comply with the letter of the law, you don't have a full faith and credit clause issue, right? If you don't have risks in other states where a judge would have the opportunity to bust your trust, okay, you've got a much better case to use a DAPT. If you have any component of your business that's interstate, or you live in a state that doesn't have a DAPT statute, you need to use some form of offshore asset protection.
So that's
Right?
one of the questions, like, when does it make sense to go offshore? So if you're doing stuff multi-state, is there a certain amount of worth, or because there's certain costs to set that up, and then ongoing costs to set that up, because you got to pay the trustee and everything else offshore.
Sure.
When does that when do you see clients do that? Obviously the risk tolerances matter, but let's assume the risk tolerances are equal. They're kind of middle of the fairway risk tolerance. When do you say, hey, this makes sense, this doesn't?
It depends on how frugal the client is, right? I mean, I have some clients that go, okay, I've got $500,000. I'm willing to pay the annual trustee fees and the CPA accounting fees and the compliance fees, and up from there. Really. I mean, I've had clients that have substantially less than that do it, but they have a high level of income and they just haven't been good savers. And now they're saying, okay, well, now we're going to be in the situation where we're going to start saving, or I'm really concerned about losing all of this, right? For no particular reason, but I just am. It would be catastrophic for me. Sure. So what's interesting to me is, I find that if I have a client who's got $5 million, that client needs an offshore trust more than the client that's got $25 million. Because if that client gets sued for everything they've got, it's catastrophic. Sure. If the guy with 25 million gets sued for 5 million, it's not so catastrophic, right? I mean, it doesn't really change the quality of life. So in some respects, you self-insure, right? And when clients get to the much higher net worths, the types of risks we're talking about are completely different, right? We're talking about institutional risk. So how is the FDIC insurance coverage $250,000 per account? Well, can we hold our money in a bank that's capitalized much better in Switzerland? It's a Swiss private bank that is not publicly traded, so it doesn't have to, squeeze every opportunity out of every dollar that they have in custody, and you can choose not to have your money repoed overnight and held in cash, and you're willing to pay a fee actually for that, but for also knowing the peace of mind that the bank doesn't have a balance sheet where it could have a liquidity issue like happened to banks here. Sure. In 2009, people had money markets freeze. That's terrifying.
It happens, guys. This is the kind of stuff, as you grow your wealth and your cash, like, these are the things that matter. FDIC, and it's a practical matter. The FDIC, from what I read, its financials, they're like Lindell Global. They're not doing so well. Lindell Global, we're in everything.
32 billion.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So it's not like they can bail out everybody. They might be able to do a couple things here and there, but the Federal Reserve, not federal, not a reserve. And that's where we're going to lock up Wayne after this interview. So just pay attention, guys. Understand.
Ray still doesn't understand what the Federal Reserve is.
He still doesn't get the concept. Wayne, what does someone have to file in terms of taxes if they're going to go offshore? Is there is it a one-page form? Is it pretty simple?
It depends, just kind of like everything else. So if you have a trust, well, I will say this also as a preface, I always defer to your CPA, okay? Because different CPAs have different ways of doing this, okay? The way that I try to set up a trust is if the client is serving either directly or indirectly as a co-trustee, that they sort of have the default authority, right, over the trust, and certainly over any assets that are in the United States. So if you create a trust, you're the co-trustee of it, and all of your assets in that trust are in the United States, then your CPA most likely would look at this and say, well, it's not an offshore trust, because the trustee that's considered the resident trustee that's in the same jurisdiction as where the trust assets are is subject to the U.S. court system and the administrative provisions. And so we're going to say that this trust is a domestic trust. So in that case, your CPA might say, yeah, I'm going to do a 1041, a grantor trust form. Or your CPA might not want to if it's a grantor trust, but you're the only beneficiary of it. That's sort of the simplest situation. The more complex situation is you have an offshore trust. The offshore trust owns a Swiss bank account, and it has an offshore LLC as well. Well, now you've got a lot.
And you're not a co-trustee.
And you're not a co-trustee, right? So, or even if you are a co-trustee in that situation, you still have to file what's called FATCA and FBAR, which is your disclosures to the IRS of the existence of foreign accounts. Well, one's not really to the IRS, it's the FinCEN, but it's still disclosure of the existence of these accounts. You have to make an election as to how you want the LLC to be taxed, because by default, you're going to be responsible for the taxes on any income that accrues to it. However, even if that LLC has no assets, you have filing requirements. You transition tax, you have GILTI tax. If your LLC has no assets in it and you fail to make these filings, the penalties are absolutely draconian. I mean, it's nuts.
There's a lot of administrative stuff that goes on. So when you make the consideration of where you want to be, definitely one of the things you want to consider is the administration, where, you know, there's a balance there of the more layers you add of protection, the more administration. I've seen so many guys where like they can't even operate their own accounts. They have so much. They ask to protect themselves like in a big bubble. And now they can't even, you know what I mean? They can't even move.
They're just, exactly. And then in that situation also, you've got to file 3520 and 3528, which are balance sheet accountings, right? So look, if you own, if this is your rainy day fund and it owns an S&P 500, you know, index fund in the Swiss account, that balance sheet accounting is not so, you know, not so difficult, but it runs the spectrum, right? You can see that it can get complex. It doesn't need to, but it can.
Right. Depends on you. And then one of the things I see a lot of guys do, I know two people well, and I'm not saying who, but I'm very close to both of these guys. One of them is almost like a dad to me. They open up these spendthrift trusts or whatever they are, that they say, hey, now I don't have to ever pay capital taxes ever. It's like, where'd you hear about that? Who told you about that? Did you run that by a CPA? And did you get a second opinion? Guys, as much as I love Wayne, if there's something that's telling me it sounds so good to be true, hey, Bryce, who do you know that can give us a second opinion on this? Let's review these documents. Do you see that happen a lot of, they'll come to you with this like new thing that no one knows about and they keep it a secret. And it's like, dude, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
All I'm going to say about it is I have had a lot of people come to me after spending a lot of money,
a ton of money,
to work with someone else, and of their own go, I just realized this isn't right. Right. I mean, I just realized this can't be what I was told that it is. Right. I mean, there's a lot of misconceptions out there, man. I mean, a spendthrift trust, a spendthrift provision just means it's just a provision that you put into a trust that basically says the creditor of a beneficiary can't touch the assets in the trust. Right. So it basically says the beneficiary cannot sell, mortgage, hypothecate, otherwise take a security interest against the interest in the trust, which basically means that if that beneficiary gets sued, right, they can't hand over the trust assets in settlement of the lawsuit. Has nothing to do with never paying taxes again, right? And if, you know, in the worst case scenario, if that trust is set up as an independently taxable entity, it hits the top marginal rate at about $12,000 of income. Right.
Oh, wow.
That may have been adjusted.
Now you just like shifted your brackets down. Like you just created
that may have been adjusted since I looked, but since last time I've looked, but you know, it's like at $12,000 of income, you hit the highest marginal rate. Now I will tell you, I've had clients that want to put, you know, $50 million into a trust and have it taxed as a separate entity. Well, then does it really matter if you hit the highest marginal rate at 12,000 of income or if it's at
whatever, right?
60? It doesn't matter, right? I mean, it's a rounding error.
Sure.
But if you're putting $50,000 of income in the trust and you hit the highest marginal rate at 12,000, well, you know, 2-3 years down the road, you could be paying way more in taxes than you would need to if you'd set it up as a grantor trust, where the person who sets it up pays the taxes for you, which by the way is also a free gift to the trust. If you set up a trust where you can pay the taxes on its income, that's not considered an additional gift to the trust.
Guys, there's a lot there. I mean, I still like, you know, I'm still learning and growing on this. This is something, and some of these things change as estate laws, tax laws change. As these laws change, Wayne is on top of it. Like, we made some different decisions. Hey, Ray, this case passed. I think risk reward, it makes sense to now change this or change this. So this is an ongoing piece that you should be having someone on your team look at and review and advise you on
an ongoing basis. I mean, just the need for a general estate plan to avoid probate court, right? Is huge.
Well, that and even the hospital stuff, the stuff you set up for us. Hey, making sure you have a limited power of attorney. Hey, making sure that who's going to make a decision if someone's wife or someone's parents end up in the hospital? Who's going to make that call? And the last thing you want to do is be in a situation where you have your brothers and sisters and you're all fighting and mom's there in bed and no one can make a decision. I mean, that sucks.
I mean, we've had some really high profile media cases in the state of Florida where it could have been avoided, right? I mean, I'm thinking of Terry Schiavo for one.
Just plan ahead, guys.
Just be proactive. Make the decisions for yourself, right? You can create a living will very easily. Create a power of attorney really easily, and a healthcare surrogacy really easily, where you basically have said, look, in these circumstances, I don't want artificial life support, or I do, right? I mean, and it's just really that simple, and it takes it off of the other people in your life that you love who are going to be stressed to the max if you ever get to that point anyways.
Yeah, and plan through, hey, what do you want? How do you want your kids to be raised? Like, what are these things? And sure, it's an uncomfortable talk, but I'd rather have it and just be done with it and move on. And then you can always address it. Hey, if you have an addition to the family or whatever, you can readdress it later. But like, at least you have the bases covered, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's no reason not to do that, for sure. Okay. And if you die in Florida with more than, I want to say it's $75,000, your state gets probated, right? And by law, it has to hire an attorney to do that, which takes percentage. You know, if you have a simple revocable trust, you can avoid that. You can avoid that process.
Yep. Right? Set up the account, do it early. What's the kind of biggest mistake on the entrepreneur side that you see them that prevent them from getting like legacy generational wealth? When guys come to you, what's the biggest mistake you see they make that prevent them from kind of passing that on and really not only just living their legacy, but also then leaving a legacy? The
answer might not be as specific as you'd like it to be here, but I think failure to ingrain into your children, into your loved ones, the degree of responsibility that comes along with the privilege of having what they are going to have. Okay, so this question always makes me think of the story of Cornelius Vanderbilt. He died, I want to say he had like $130 million or something when he died in 1877. If you bring that to current dollars with inflation, he would have died with $220 billion. Jesus. Right? That's like twice what Jeff Bezos has.
Yep.
Or something like that, right? I mean, he would have been up there with like Sam Walton and Bezos and Bill Gates and
Musk,
Carlos Slim and Musk. Yeah, I mean, yep. I don't know if this is true or not, but I have heard, and I've heard it from some pretty reputable sources, but again, I'm prefacing it with I just don't know if it's true, that the Vanderbilt family had a family reunion several years ago. And of all of Cornelius Vanderbilt's heirs, there was not a single millionaire among them. We're talking like, just a little bit over 100 years from when this, 140 years ago. So I don't know when they would have had
You're
this.
talking two to three generations. You're not talking about a long time.
Purported anniversary, right? So yeah, exactly. There was a lot of, when you read the history of why, of how this happened, how he left money. He left the majority of it to one of his sons. But I think he had like 13 children or something. But the last, sort of the last months of his life, he was confined to his house. And again, nobody alive was there. So who knows? And I haven't fact checked all the historical records, but what I read is that he had these spiritual advisors who were there and that he was making changes to his estate plan. And he hadn't been really proactive and set this up in a way in advance when we can all be really certain that he was in his right mind and that he established it. I think it's just passing on your level of evolution to your next generation, right? And making sure that they understand that there's a major responsibility that comes along with these privileges and with wealth. And one thing I love to see my clients do is set up in their trusts where their kids can pull a certain amount of money out of a trust up until a certain age, but it's only an amount that's equal to whatever they earn in the real world for that year, right? So it's sort of like, well, I'm going to get 100% bonus based on what I earn, but gosh, I'm going to get out there and like really earn.
Right. And if you want to start a business, maybe you get you can come to the company with a business plan and get a loan.
Sure.
But you gotta go earn, and we'll double whatever you make in profits or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, that's it. It's just about giving that level of education and that level of understanding, right?
I think what
the next generation, and then protecting them against themselves, like you've said, right? Because we all make mistakes. So part of your journey, right, has been hardship. Right? I love your story, right? How scrappy you had to be from the beginning to get started and to achieve the level of success that you've achieved. Your kids probably won't ever have to be that scrappy, right? That ecosystem that you were in formed you. Well, your kids are in their own ecosystem now. So what is the result of that going to be? right? I mean,
it's very different, right?
So it's very different. I mean, I love Larry Ellison, who's the founder of Oracle. I think I heard him say one time, I had all of the disadvantages in life that are required to be super successful.
It's great.
Right. So something like that, right? I mean, you know, you got to just consider the ecosystem where you're raising your family and who is going to be the next generation, who's going to carry on the legacy, and then protect them from themselves, and then educate them, right? But I got to be honest with you, when you're gone, right, it's out of your hands.
Sure.
You know, it's out of your hands. To some extent, I think a lot of things that we think are in our hands right now aren't in our hands anyways, right? And
Correct.
it's kind of an illusion. But when you're gone, you know, hey, what you've done is what you've done.
A couple of thoughts there is, A, you don't take any of it with you, right? So really all you take with you is your consciousness, right? Because I have this core belief that you continue on creating, right? That your physical body here goes away, but your soul, your spirit keeps on creating, even though you're not here. All you can bring with you from this lifetime and any lifetime is that consciousness. And that level of consciousness, ultimately the values and the relationships that you want to leave your kids with. A lot of times you'll see a second and third generation not keep the wealth that was there, the financial wealth, because they don't have the consciousness that made it in the first place, right? This morning I was with my daughter looking at the ocean front, and she was there sitting with me, and I go, Tina, this looks beautiful. You love it, right, baby? And she's like, yeah, I love it, Dad. That's all she knows.
That's it.
Right. So can you blame her as she grows up? If I were to put myself in her shoes, like, not that she takes it for granted, but like, that's her life. She doesn't know the struggle, right? She doesn't, right? You know, I have an aristocrat daughter who loves horseback riding, you know, like things I never got to do. And I want to be able to bless her with those things, and at the same time earn them and show her the values. Like, so example, the other day she fell off the horse. She was riding and she's learning to ride by herself, and she fell off. And I go, no. Daddy, I don't want to go. I'm scared. I go, no. I paid for these classes. You are going. Now, you don't have to get back on the horse, but I'll tell you, my experience with life is you want to get back on that horse. You want to get back on the horse. And being scared is part of, I go, baby, I get scared every single day, but you still show up. So you can still ingrain some of these values. They're just a little bit different. And you want your kids to be at a higher, not higher level, but you know what I mean? You want to give them things that you weren't able to do.
And you want to reinforce the idea of serving and of creating as being just as rewarding as having.
Yes.
Actually being more rewarding than having, because the only reason you have is because you've created and you've served.
Sure.
Right. Yeah. You've told me a million times, I want a deal that is as complicated and has as much hair on it as possible, because that's where I'm adding massive value.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
I've heard you say it many, many times. Sure. But if what you focus on is what you have instead of what you can give and what you can do, right? I think that creates a trap. Put the focus on creating, on adding value, and say, listen, as long as you're doing that, you're always going to have enough. You're always going to have what you want. And by the way, if that is the end in itself,
it's
creating
great.
and adding value, you've always got what you're always going to have what you want.
It's
right?
The effort. It's showing up. It's very similar to like going to the gym. It's like that's why I think the gym is a spiritual practice, whatever that is for you. But you show up, and you're only going to get in what you put in, and all you can measure is your effort. You don't measure the result. That's just is what it is, you know. But you measure the effort you put in, and that you show up consistently. That, to me, irrespective of the outcome, like, get the actions right in the right state of being, and the results take care of themselves, right? And the state of being is huge. And this, I'm still learning that one as we go along, but you can have two people take the very same actions, but one's way of being is in an abundant gratitude state, and the other one's doing this like I have to, and the results are massively different.
Massively different. Just the mindset.
Yep.
You know the story about the monkeys, right? Or it's not even a story. It was an actual experiment that was done where they gave one cage of monkeys. Every monkey was given one apple, and they were ecstatic. Every monkey just like, you know, losing their mind with happiness. And they've got another set of monkeys, and they give each monkey an apple. And then a little while later, they give that set of monkeys a second apple. Well, the level of happiness just goes through the roof, right? I mean, overjoyed, 2 apples. They took 1 apple away. So you've got 2 sets of monkeys. They've all got 1 apple, but you've got one group of monkeys that is really, really ticked off with having 1 apple because they're perceiving the loss of their 1 apple, of their second apple. You've got the other group of monkeys that's still just overjoyed to have been given the first. So same factual scenario. It's just the way that it's perceived. I just lost an apple versus I just gained one. You know, I mean,
100% is perception.
yeah, and you can shift it a lot just by taking the time to be grateful for what you have, including the challenges that you face.
Yeah, I mean,
we've all got them.
Yeah, the challenges are there to help you grow and evolve your soul. And the challenges are there to come up so that you can heal those challenges. And once you heal those challenges, it takes you to a whole other level. It's really true about that which doesn't kill you, make you stronger. Like it's almost like you needed that challenge to grow. You have a good saying about the feather, the hammer, and the freight train, right? That's
not mine. That's not mine. I gotta cite Doug Lodmell on that. But
okay.
he used to always say that you he said life gives you and I don't know if he came up with that or he got that from somewhere else too, but I've always sort of carried that one with me. But it is a good one. Yeah.
You want to tell listeners what it is because they don't know. It's more like inside joke.
I mean, life gives you a feather, right? It's tickling you, pushing you in a certain direction, and then things get a little more harsh. You get a hammer, and if you still don't get the message, then the next one's a freight train, right? It's coming.
Yep. And I think that, you know, one of the things I feel that as I'm starting to evolve in this consciousness, meditation, spiritual path, the more you're in that and the more you're silent and the more you're still, stillness is the doorway to wisdom divine. And that's not for me. That's a book I was reading, The Way of Mastery. But stillness, like the more you're still, like be still and know that I am, the more you're still, you could get more of the feathers, right? In my old life, I was never still. It was always go, keep going, do more, add more. So I would need the freight train to come hit me because I wasn't right. But now rarely does a freight train come. And usually I get it by the hammer. And a lot of times I'm getting it by the feather, right? So you can, but that's, to me, that's where the real fun is in life, because as you get it by the feather, financial wealth comes easier. Relationships come easier. Like, it's just because you're in that flow, you're in alignment with the universe.
Yeah. And that sort of is your baseline and your script, your operating system, right? Like your computer has an operating system. That's how it opens all these apps and the programs and whatever. Yours is to acknowledge what's coming, right? Yours is to get the message. That is your script, is to be open, and it's what works for you. I love it. It's good.
And then ultimately, that's what Wayne and I are talking about, passing to your kids. Because if they can get that down, they can make their own money. They don't need your money. Your money is peanuts. Like, and plus they don't want it, because like you want them to be proud of that muscle that they earned that. There's something to be said about you earning something. And I'm sure you and I can both remember of times we've earned something and no one gave it to us. And I'm so proud of these shoes that I bought, 20 years ago that were $150. But I earned those shoes and I took care of them. Like there's all these things that come along when you earn something that really.
Well, and it's the anticipation of it. And it's it's not the instant gratification that we've become so used to now,
It's the process. You love the process.
Yeah. We have a friend of the family who's from a pretty wealthy family. I just love this because her son, who I want to say is like 8 or 9 years old, they were at some sort of event. I think it was at a country club or somewhere. Can't remember what it was, but he had something on his plate and he didn't like it. And he just went over like the bushes and tossed it. Right. And his mom made him go pull the food out of the bushes and eat it. Jesus. And said, we don't take food for granted and just throw it out and waste it like that because we don't like it.
I like that.
And I loved it because it's a message that will always stay with that kid. Yep. It's like, okay, right? I mean, that's it. It's being grateful and not taking things for granted, I think, is one of the keys to just feeling successful, feeling rich, right? If you're grateful for what you've got,
then you are wealthy, right? Now you're one with wealth, meaning a lot of times external wealth is outside of you and now you're separate from it. So then now you just made time and space. So now you got to do all these things, you have to, and then it's going to take time. But if you're one with it, then the universe will serve it up for you. I'm not saying, hey, just meditate, don't do nothing. No, you still have to show up to the work, but it's almost like the doors are open and there's a straight and narrow path to it. And it's already been set up. All the doors are unlocked. You just got to go through them, right? But it's very different than, sitting there fighting with the lock, busting the door open like I used to do back in the day, like running around with a bull and, you know what I mean? right?
Yeah,
So
you were running around chasing waterfalls, Ray.
yeah, don't go chasing waterfalls. That's another one there you guys want to listen to. And then kind of let's wrap this up, man. On
Yep.
the asset protection wealth piece, kind of what's the one thing, Wayne, you want to leave our listeners with?
Be proactive. You know,
like
you
that.
spend a lot of time thinking about how to accumulate wealth. Take some time to think about how to protect it, how to preserve it, and what you want your legacy around it to be.
I like that.
You know.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, the only thing I would add to that on my side would be just really going back to what Wayne and I spend the majority of our time talking. And it's not ironic. It's actually an alignment that I think the more your gratitude, the more you meditate, the more you begin to work on your operating consciousness, on your system, the more you begin to be open to these things and you actually begin to be wealthy inside and be grateful, the less bad shit happens to you. You're just not attracting it to you. Like, it's just like, I don't think it doesn't come up for me. You know what I mean?
I mean, you just, because you've created the habit of looking at things like an investment in yourself, as opposed to a cost and a drain. If you look at, hey, I'm going to have this conversation with my financial advisor or with my CPA or with my attorney, and you look at it as, gosh, this is a time suck. I really want to be doing something else. That's one attitude you could potentially have about it. If you look at it as, wow, this is an investment in growing and learning, in making my business safer, providing some peace of mind for myself, knowing that my family is cared for, well, that's another attitude you can have about it, right? So we're having this conversation, which means we have a lot to be grateful for,
100%.
right? And when we talked about that a lot of folks in the world, this isn't even on their radar because this is, you know, they're worried about where the next meal is coming from. That's it. Be grateful. Do something good for someone else today. I will
be
too.
grateful. Let's leave it at that. Be grateful and be charitable, or be generous. Even, I mean, it doesn't have to be financially. Just a thank you. I mean, just a real sincere thank you. Like, people are like, you just stopped and said thank you. I'm like, yeah, why wouldn't I?
Yeah, for real.
Yeah,
for real.
So,
I mean, all right, buddy. This has been great. Let's do it again.
Thank
I
you,
appreciate
brother.
you too, Ray.
I appreciate
See
you,
my
man.
friend.